Hi, and welcome to the webinar. There we go. Let's turn those off. Today we have Danny Alexander here. He's a DSI faculty member. Design for Social Innovation is a program at the School of Visual Arts that we both work with. He's going to be presenting Design in the Toilet. He will explain that title a little bit more as we go. Danny is the founder of Black and Blue Design and is going to be an IDEO.org fellow starting in the fall. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
A few housekeeping things before we start. If you want to tweet about the webinar, we use the hashtag D4SI. Danny's Twitter name, if you'd like to follow him, is DalexDalex, and we are SVA DSI. And we are still accepting applications for the Buffalo Prize. This is a program to recognize and reward a young woman who has a connection to Buffalo to help them contribute to the revitalization there. Great program and amazing opportunity. You can go to our website, http://dsi.sva.edu for more on that. And on to you.
Thank you, Aaron. And before I get started, we just want to wish Cheryl Heller.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Today is her birthday, and she is the founder and chair of this program, and we're all thrilled to know her and wish her a happy birthday. So as Aaron said, I'm Danny Alexander. First, I want to start with a little bit of background. I entered industrial design. I fell in love with it when I was 18 years old, and it was when I still thought that design was... I don't know how to control this. There we go. When design looked something like this. I was a 17-year-old guy and growing up in New Jersey, and I fell in love with cars, and I actually wanted to be a car designer, which is funny to me now, but back then this was the pinnacle of design, and it was the first time when I really paid attention to the fact that all of the things around us were actually designed objects. From there, I developed a love of course, Apple products, as many of us are, and I was particularly intrigued with this design in particular, the original iMac. It was the first time when I really considered that objects around us, whether they were banal objects or hyper-functional objects, could be designed objects. And it was really the first time when I grasped the idea that design could be sculpture. And then, of course, as I progressed in my love of design, I fell in love with mid-century furniture and Karim Rashid's design products and all sorts of things. But design for me was really the merging of engineering and art, and that was what made me originally fall in love with it. When I got to school, though, I went to school for industrial design, and I came to a stark realization in my sophomore year of college when I started the design program, and I realized that design for as many positive consequences as it's had on society has also had a lot of really negative consequences. As one of my favorite designers, Victor Papanek, says, I'm going to read this, there are professions more harmful than industrial design, but only a few of them. And that was a quote that really haunted me, and it really shook me to the core and made me question if I was really cut out to be a designer, and if these tools that I was learning were really the best tools. In school, I was being taught to make millions of products and really negotiate between engineers and manufacturers and consumers. And ultimately, the art that I once fell in love with left a tremendous feeling of guilt when I discovered the negative consequences that happened down the road. So ultimately, being an optimist, though, I went to a mentor of mine who taught me that design isn't just about sculpture or engineering. Design isn't just about plastic or metal or anything beautiful, but design is a tool. And as much as I was learning to make things and make many of them, those same skills that I learned from understanding users' needs and making things beautiful and designing objects and experiences that people desired. Those same things could be used to do good. And so this idea that design is a tool was a really transformative idea for me. And it was an idea that really helped shape my career from then forth. So with that, I carried through school and graduated and went on to pursue design and social innovation, which was not necessarily a term back then. This was not that long ago, but it's still a relatively new term. With this idea that design was a tool. And I think there are enough case studies of beautiful objects out there. I think I showed 3 of them in the beginning, the BMW and the Apple and the Eames chair. And you can go to the MoMA or any design store and see plenty of them. But design doesn't always have to be sexy. Design can really be more functional. It can really leverage unmet needs and desirability to drive change. And I think some of those examples are really unsexy. And I often joke that my career is in the toilet because I happen to have done many projects regarding sanitation, which is what I'm here to talk about today. So I'm here today to share with you a few case studies of projects that are not necessarily sexy, although I see the sex appeal in them, but they are really practical, and it is really leveraging that idea that design is a tool, and it's using that tool to solve or I should say a whole web of some of the biggest problems we face in the world today. Pause for a minute. I usually crack jokes when I talk in public, but it's really hard to tell a knock joke when you're talking to a camera. But anyway.
I'll answer for you if you need me to.
So sanitation. So specifically regarding sanitation, I'll give three case studies of various approaches to addressing sanitation through design, all of which are dramatically different. But sanitation, just to sort of make sure we're all on the same page, is, as it's described here, it's conditions relating to public health, and in particular, the provision of clean drinking water and adequate sewage disposal. Really, really unsexy. And within sanitation, there are a whole web of problems, and there are a whole slew of different ways that design can support the solution of problems related to sanitation. So first, I'll talk about a technology problem. Design and technology are often connected. If you think of Apple solving technology problems, they often use design, and it can be an interface design or product design to solve challenges for users. So with sanitation, there are a number of technology problems. There's the obvious ones, which are every time we flush something down the toilet, we use a tremendous amount of water. There are environmental concerns. Every time you flush something nasty down the toilet, the effects on the waterways and everything are pretty dramatic. And then there are the human health concerns, which are the chemicals we use and the processes we use to treat waste are often really, really terrible. So when I started my, here's a graphic image of what happens. Okay, I skipped that slide. Anyway, so I started my career at a company called Method, which is out in San Francisco. And Method is a home cleaning products company with a mission to start a happy, healthy home revolution, which is ambitious for a cleaning products company. But we view design and experience, whether it's fragrance or product design or the copywriting or our website or our customer service, as a holistic experience, and really try to design those experiences to drive happiness and health in the home. So when approaching something like sanitation, we saw a really unsexy problem, which was the toxicity of the chemicals we use to clean our homes and our bodies, and in this case, our toilets, were causing all sorts of problems downstream that most people weren't aware of, and also potentially causing harm in the home. Bleach in particular, which most people use to clean their toilets, has all sorts of effects on human health and environmental health. So we worked for 3 years to design a safe and effective toilet cleaner. And when tasked with trying to design a package for this new cleaner, we were faced with a challenge of communicating not only that it was an effective cleaner, but also that it was a gentle cleaner that was safe for you and your family. So you can see here an old advertisement that Method put out, which was promoting our cleaner and healthier approach to designing home cleaning products. So this was for a glass cleaner, and our pitch was lay off the hard stuff. And you can find plenty more about them on methodhome.com. That's my little pitch. But when we were approaching the problem of cleaning the toilet, we started with sketching and really just tried to get to the functionality. These are some really old sketches I did with my boss and mentor, Josh Handy. We did probably hundreds of pages of sketches like this, trying to capture not only the utilitarian nature of the product. Toilet bowl cleaners are specifically designed to have angled necks and all sorts of other functional things, but also the friendly nature of it. And we were really trying to communicate something that was friendly and appealing and would pop out on shelf. So after the sketches, we went through a series of renderings. These are just four groups of probably hundreds, if not thousands, of renderings that we did before we did a whole round of prototypes, starting on the left with a rapid prototyped package that we made in-house, all the way to the right, which was the final product. So this is the final product, and I think we effectively communicated, and Erin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
love this one.
we tried to communicate, as I said, the gentle nature of the product. It is biodegradable from natural sources, and so safe that you could drink it, although I wouldn't necessarily suggest it. And the packaging is also effective at what it's designed for. So the little embossings are the grip that you can use to make sure you don't drop it in the toilet, and the angle is there to ensure that you can clean under the rim. So something that's extremely utilitarian and has a really tremendous impact on lowering the amount of toxic chemicals entering our homes is designed to be sexy and desirable. So this is the first case study, which is a pretty traditional design approach, which is really just to understand the unmet needs and desires of users and make a product or service that meets those needs and desires. So, so the second problem is that often the technology we make isn't appropriate for the context in which it's used. So designing at Method was a challenge for a number of reasons, but we understood our market pretty well. The American predominantly American market of middle-class shoppers shopping at big box retailers. We understood their needs and their homes, and we could design around those. But too often the technology gets in the way of the appropriate design. And in sanitation in particular, in much of the world where the problems are most severe, this is clearly the case. So after I left Method, about 3.5 years ago, I went to found Black and Blue Design in Argentina, as Erin said, and worked there in Argentina for about 1.5 years before moving back to the States and independently consulting. And one of the first projects I did once I moved back to the States was a project with IDEO, Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor, and Unilever. And it was a project trying to address in-home sanitation for the urban poor of Ghana. Which was a daunting task, but a really exciting one as well. So here on this slide, this is actually an excerpt from our final deliverable for the first phase of the project, which was really just uncovering opportunities. And this is actually an open source document. You can find it online and download it and use it as you'd like. And this is just an overview of some of the sanitation problems in the rest of the world. The rest of the world being not the United States in this case. So 1 billion people live in poor urban communities, 1.1 billion don't have access to safe water, and more than double that don't have access to adequate sanitation. That's a pretty tremendous number, and it's a really hard idea to get your head around when we're so used to using toilets, in restaurants and cafes and our offices in our homes. It's really difficult to imagine what life would be like if you didn't have access to a toilet at all throughout your day. And so as we sort of tried to understand the severity and the scope of this problem, we really had to focus in on a particular region and understand a really specific context and why this problem persisted. So we focused on one particular city, which was Kumasi, Ghana. And Kumasi is the second largest city in Kenya. In Ghana, with 1.5 million residents, only 28% of which have access to sanitation at home. So a pretty well-developed city and a pretty well-developed country, but with pretty low sanitation coverage proportionate to their income. So it was an interesting place because the economy was pretty robust, relatively speaking, but the sanitation coverage was pretty terrible. So this was one of the families we met with, and This is sort of an average-sized family living in a compound in Kumasi. So the traditional family home in Kumasi looks a little something like this from above. There's a common area where a lot of the cooking and washing gets done, and then surrounding the home, or surrounding the common area, are usually 5 to 10 living spaces, bedrooms. So most homes are between, I would say, 10 and 30 people. Most of which, almost all of which, of this style don't have a toilet or any sort of sanitation. So, so first we tried to uncover what the existing options on the ground were. This is sort of the higher end option, I guess you could say. You can see he's holding the key to the toilet. It was kept under lock and guard to keep people out, but this is essentially a very nice pit latrine, which means that that's not a toilet that's connected to a plumbing main. It's just a toilet over a deep well in the ground. So those fill up after about a few years, and you need to hire a vacuum truck to come and clean it. This is another option, which is, as you saw in one of the earlier slides, really not very widely practiced. This is actually, if you are connected to a plumbing system, this is where it ends up. So not all of the treatment plants are working. As you can see here, there's a lot of really beautiful, but not necessarily ideal algae growing on this treatment plant. This is what, unfortunately, is the best option for most of the residents of Kumasi, which is a public toilet. Many of these are owned by the government or are donated by international organizations, and are essentially a series of stalls, or often not even stalls, over a big septic tank, I guess you could say, which is also supposed to be emptied every few years. And so one of the challenges with this is that, first of all, it's inaccessible for the elderly and handicapped. It's expensive. As you can see here, one use is between 3 and 7 cents generally in American dollars. And they're only open limited hours, so from 5 in the morning until 10 at night or something like that. So it's pretty easy to imagine how that would be challenging as an everyday solution for your sanitation needs.
Trying to time things.
Yeah, exactly. Not to mention when you're raising a family with multiple children with limited income, it becomes really overwhelming to bear the cost of this kind of sanitation. So unfortunately, what ends up happening in a lot of places is that this is an abatement notice for a resident of Kumasi for having what they call a flying toilet in their property, which is basically human waste in a plastic bag. And this is unfortunately pretty ubiquitous across Kumasi and many other parts of the region. So unfortunately, even though there are better options, they're not often used. So it was really our job to understand why aren't the best options being used. And in thinking of that, we did a little research into the history, and this is actually what's called a bucket latrine. And a bucket latrine was outlawed in the early 90s in Ghana. And a bucket latrine is exactly what it sounds like. This is what the user would see. This is the inside of a private room with a lid covering what is a bucket underneath. And on the reverse of this, on the back wall, there's a hole in the wall where a night soil collector would come every few days and collect this bucket of waste and dump it into ideally a treatment center. The reason why it was outlawed was not because it wasn't a good enough solution for the users, but because it was leading to all sorts of human health concerns and public health concerns downstream. The night soil collectors had little incentive to take the waste to where it belonged, so they ended up just dumping it on the streets. So it was outlawed and has a legacy of being a really bad thing now. Nevertheless, it's an important part of their sanitation history. So the process we went through as designers, once we uncovered what existed now, we did our competitive research, was to go and really understand what the desires of our target market were. So not only what they needed from the public toilet or from an in-home toilet, but what were their larger aspirations? What were the things that brought them great joy and encourage them to take pride in their homes, and what were the things that they were most likely to invest in, what were the services they trusted the most. And as design researchers, we really took a sort of applied anthropology perspective to this. We brought with us drawings. This is my colleague Adam Reineck, as you can see, holding up a drawing of a water flush toilet. And I'm trying to understand, how important things like flushing were to the experience of using a toilet. So we used drawings, we used prototypes. This is another example of a drawing of different collection methods and which ones seemed the most trustworthy to people. And then we came back to our offices, and this was at the IDEO office in Palo Alto. And we made prototypes, and prototypes were sometimes pretty, but often they were they looked like this. And this is basically I don't know, what do you even call those things? A container. A container with a toilet seat and a hole. And so we made about 10 prototypes and brought about 6 of them with us back to Ghana a few weeks later. And you can see on the right is an actual camping toilet that exists on the market today. And there were several others we brought with us. But
the one on the front makes me a little nervous.
The one on the front was part of a prototype, definitely not the complete one. And this is a picture of one of the prototypes actually in context in someone's home. So we brought with us prototypes and left them in people's homes. And there's no better way to really understand and get beneath the surface of someone's needs than to actually leave with them a prototype. And in this case, because it was testing both a product, but more importantly a service, it was understanding what happens between the user, the product, and the service provider. And so we left this in people's homes, and we hired a service provider to help us service the toilets. I've left out some of the more graphic images, actually, but I'd be happy to share them with you at another time. We hired a service provider and really tried to understand, both from a user's perspective, as well as a government perspective and a business perspective, and a service provider's perspective, what were the needs around this toilet. Along with the prototypes, we also did other things to try to understand what the usage patterns were, and we left behind this sign-up sheet in several of the homes we tested the prototypes with, and just tried to get a sense of how many people would be using the toilets and at what times of day. And the going claim was that most people really only went to the bathroom during the day, because if you don't have a toilet and you admit to using the bathroom at night, you're acknowledging that you are more often than not using the streets or a public toilet. So what we found here, as you can see, is that just as many people were using the toilet at night as they were during the day. So just as you can imagine, there was a need for it 24 hours a day. And as you can also see, it was a pretty popular, this is after about 2 days, it was a pretty popular toilet, and we had many people coming from around the neighborhood to try it, which is always fun. So moving beyond the process, we took the learning from the prototypes and all of the field research we did, combined it with our understanding of what the technical needs for the product would be. What was the best way? What was the best practice in terms of removing waste from the home? And tried to find the middle ground between what was technically ideal and what was really desirable. And we formed from that a design for this toilet. So it looks like a toilet, I think, would you say?
It does, a very cute toilet.
Well, thank you. It looks like a cute toilet, and here's a view from above, but I think the details of this will show that it's a dramatically different toilet than most of us are used to. So as you can see on this first slide, the top and bottom are separate pieces, and there's a hinging lid. The second slide shows that this is a urine separating toilet. So the urine is actually diverted out to the street. Urine is generally pretty harmless. With a service model like this where you're collecting the waste, the amount of volume that it would have taken up would have been extreme. So, so we basically diverted it and really tried to capture the solid waste. And as you can see here, the toilet opens up. So when a service provider comes, he can open this up. He's the only one who has the key, he or she, I should say. Opens it up, and inside is a cartridge of waste that he can take to a service center, and we've built up a local system around cleaning and filling these containers with a biodigester. These are all probably technical terms that mean nothing to most of you, but essentially this is the way the service works, and this is really where we focused our design, was not necessarily as much on the product, but more on the service and understanding how all of the different components work. So the first step is that the toilets would be sold or actually rented into people's homes. The second step would be that on a biweekly or even 3 or 4 times a week basis, an operator would come around and collect several of these containers, bring them to a localized dumping ground, which is essentially a sealed container where they can be stored locally until that container was full. And then when that container was full, a larger truck would come and take the waste and bring it to a waste treatment plant. And the ideal scenario would be to use that waste to generate electricity or convert it into fertilizer. So we were more focused on the first 4 steps, but we're working with, or I should say, Unilever and Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor are working on partnering with people for that fifth step. So what's great about this project is that not only was it a great theory and a few beautiful renderings, but it's actually happening. So this past year, it's been pilot tested in 100 homes in Kumasi, and this year, Unilever and Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor are planning to scale it up to between 7,000 and 10,000 homes in Kumasi. So if you figure that's 10 to 30 people in a home, that's hundreds of thousands of people with access to sanitation in the home now. Here's an example of where a local service station is, and you can see all the empty tanks inside being stored waiting to be delivered with our beautiful logo. Clean Team was the name of it. So a lot of learnings along the way, but those were that was essentially our approach to making known technology more accessible, but more importantly, more appropriate for the context in which we were delivering it. Are we taking questions at the end? Is that the plan?
Questions can come at the end, but if you have them, definitely feel free to put them in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I definitely have a bunch of questions for you. So. Okay, great.
And I'm breezing through this, and I have only just a couple more slides left, so I'd love to get your questions. I could talk about this stuff all day. So accessibility is the last thing I want to talk about today, which is another part of the problem. Even though sanitation coverage in Ghana was pretty poor, relatively speaking, the people we were working with are a lot better off than a lot of the world's population. And a lot of the sanitation problem can't be fixed in the short term with just market solutions like that. So I think working beyond those types of communities, there's a greater issue, which is really the distribution of wealth and understanding how resources and services like sanitation can be universally accessible, even where wealth isn't evenly or even practically distributed. So you can see here a map from WHO and UNICEF information, basically mapping access to sanitation around the world. And this is from 2004, but I doubt that it would look much different today. And you can see exactly where most of the sanitation access is falling short. And it's falling short in predominantly poor areas, sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia and India. And you can see that the Western European, Australian, and American markets are pretty damn well off. So most of the technology problems we face here at home are around water usage and everything like that. But just getting access is really critical in some of these communities. How, you might ask, might design address something like this? And this is something that I'm in the process of working on with a team from Melbourne, Australia. And we have founded a toilet paper company, I should say. They have founded, and I am supporting a toilet paper company called Who Gives a Crap. And Who Gives a Crap is a philanthropic toilet paper company with the aim of leveraging conscientious capitalism and working with what BBMG would call the new consumer to drive sanitation improvement around the world. And so by linking the problem we're hoping to address with the product we're hoping to sell, we are trying to create a more conscientious and ethical consumption pattern. So we are not only trying to improve sanitation, we're also trying to improve the environmental footprint of the product we're using. So we are working with exclusively recycled papers and trying to reduce consumption in various other ways. And we're essentially taking the same approach that I've taken at Method and with IDEO and with several other partners to leverage design to make a lot of these changes. So you see here a very, very early rendering of what a product might look like. But the experience is something that we're working to design right now. And we're considering not only how you buy toilet paper and what it looks like on shelf, which is generally where most toilet paper companies stop, but beyond ply counts and softness measurements and things like that, which are important. We're trying to understand how people store them and use them and put them on the holders and how they rip them and how they dispose of them, and really try to inject a bit of design and a smile at every one of those stages. So we're in the early stages of this, and if you have any ideas, I would love to hear them. Otherwise, feel free to message me on Twitter or email me, and I'd be happy to tell you more about where we're going with it. But those are two case studies of what I've done in the past and one of what I'm working on presently. So with that, I want to thank you and just open it up for questions.
All right, and we do have a couple questions, so we'll just come right down here. We have Allie, and she's asking, what other communities could you see this being transposed into, like India or Southeast Asia? Or do you think that its strength is that it is so tailored to the context? I think that's a great question about scalability of a lot of these ideas.
Yeah, it's a great question. That's something that's actively being discussed by everyone involved. So the initial plan was really to design something that was specific for the Ghanaian context, with the assumption that if it was successful, it would be essentially tested in other markets and hopefully adapted in other markets. I think what's really interesting about this is that so much of the sanitation behavior is contextual. So even within Kumasi, we saw differences between the Muslim communities and the Christian communities. The Muslim communities, in case you didn't know, Kumasi's religious breakdown and how they and their anal cleansing preferences, but yeah, I went there. They prefer water, whereas the Christian communities prefer newspaper. So, I mean, even in that context, the effect on the design is pretty dramatic. Like I said, there's limited volume that you can accept, so water takes up a lot of volume. Yeah. So I think even within the city, context is really important. As you look beyond Africa or at least beyond Ghana, there are some communities where squatting is preferred over sitting, in which case the design would have to be really, really different. I think what is really interesting, though, is taking the core idea of the service and product with a pretty simple technology and adapting that and reskinning that in a way that's desirable and contextually appropriate. So the answer is that it can and will work in other contexts, but that adaptation is exactly the benefit that design provides.
Well, I think a lot of what you're saying is fantastic, and we have a bunch more questions. So before I dive into my own, which I'd love to ask you about that, we're going to skip to Jessica, who wants to know, what about cleaning? Are the families taking pride in their newly acquired facilities to clean them? I imagine with limited water sources, cleaning can be a bit of a challenge. And I also want to point out that Danny will actually be teaching a class at DSI regarding a lot of these sort of processes and systems. But I'm going to let you kind of go into this sort of more cultural, I'd say it's sort of cleaning, and then there's also this sort of cultural aspect that comes into, what do you consider clean, and is that part of your research?
Yeah, absolutely. So we touched on a lot of these topics in our research about how to define clean, how to what constitutes something that you can take pride in, and who is willing to do what. It's not a job that most people are willing to take. So what we found is that a job in sanitation is still a job, and that there's for every opportunity we created to create employment, there was someone willing to take it, which is really exciting. And so along with this, there's now a team that's already employed in Ghana of I would guess now between 5 and 10 who are just servicing those 100 homes. So there's plenty of employment that goes along and supports this. think in terms of cleaning in the home, the part of the benefit of this is that it's not a product that's sold, it's a product that's leased. And that's for a number of reasons, but essentially the main reason is that the product without the service is useless. Mm-hmm. It is no better than a bucket. And so we worked to basically redesign the experience of how someone might collect it and service it, and basically fix all the problems with bucket latrines, while also making it clean and something that families can take pride in. So, so the answer is that most people don't do anything beyond just regular maintenance, just wiping it off, but that the service providers clean it thoroughly every couple of days.
Perfect. And I love what you're talking about, which is that it's so much more than just a product, it's really a system.
Yeah.
That you've thought through not only the communication aspects of it, but the business model aspects of it, how people interact with it, the user experience. And I think that that's when we talk about design, that's really the process, the holistic look that we're talking about. Paulette wants to know, how long have you or IDEO been working on the toilet project?
Great question. So to clarify, I'm actually not involved in the project right now. I finished my work on the project about a year ago. And we worked on it for, I would say, about 6 months prior to that, really doing the early opportunity finding, the prototyping, and the design of the brand mark, the product, and the service model. The 100 family test has really been conducted by Unilever and Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor with the support of IDEO. So IDEO continues to be involved as far as I know, and the two other organizations are really leading the charge. So it's been about a year and a half now, and we're really excited for the next stage of growth.
So as we talk about the fact that you're going to be an IDEO.org fellow, are you hoping to be able to work on this project there? I don't know if this is stuff you're not allowed to talk about.
No. I mean, it's all speculative now. So, so as Aaron said, I'll be an IDEO.org fellow next year, which means I'll be working on a project similar to this with IDEO.org for a year from August 1st through next summer. So it would be a dream to continue working on this. I think that it's rare that designers get to see a concept through from such an early stage through such a sort of further along execution stage, especially in this field where you have to do the really diligent long-term studies and everything like that. So it would be a dream to continue working on it, but otherwise I'm just excited for all the projects that we have in store for us.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks a lot to the type of partners you have to have. Like, I think as you talk about this work, and what we've seen within our own program is that it takes many different kinds of people and partners in order to make sure that the multiple iterations happen. Paula has another great question, which is, where are the toilets made? How are they serviced if they are broken? That's
a great question. So the toilets are currently, interestingly, the 100 family test home, we found a toilet that's functionality was similar enough to ours that was available from, I believe, Sweden? I don't know. It was a very expensive backcountry home toilet. And so Unilever basically worked their magic and sourced 100 or so of them and shipped them down to Ghana and modified them for this 100 family test. So the design you see in that image is now currently being produced. So for the past year, they've been produced in Sweden and shipped down. In terms of where they're being produced now, I think that's to be determined, and I'm not really sure. But obviously, the ideal would be to manufacture locally, although it's really challenging to. It's just a really big piece of material, so it's challenging to find the right partners for that. So time will tell.
Absolutely. So we also have a question from Deanna on how are the sanitation collectors now appropriately motivated to deliver the waste when it was intended? Also, how did you get the law changed? And that actually brings up a great question about working in other countries.
Yep.
What kind of barriers did you see there? And
oh yeah, that's a great question, and actually one of the hardest challenges we faced, which was working in these communities. It's really critical to have buy-in at every level and support from the community at both on the grassroots level on the ground, but also from senior leadership in the communities. So we had the support of some really amazing people in Kumasi. A few local chiefs really supported us, and we got the help of a local assemblyman who had a tremendous amount of credibility in the community. And that really opened up a lot of doors for us in terms of getting our foot in the door. In terms of how the waste collectors are properly incentivized, part of it is that the distance before, it was essentially an open bucket. In bucket latrines, there was an open bucket that a night soil collector would have to, more often than not, carry on their head to a dumping site. So if you can imagine what that would be like, there's very little incentive to walk very far with it. The model that we've pursued since then, the container, as you can see, it seals. It has a gasket and a seal, so that it won't spill during transport. It's also designed to fit on a cart, and the collector no longer has to walk I think it was 3 miles before. It's really only a couple hundred feet, or at most maybe a couple hundred yards that a collector will now have to walk to get to the dumping spot. So that was the reason we created those intermediate bulk container collection points, which is that big trucks can't get down the little alleys where these people live, but people with hand carts could. So getting them out of the home and to a place where the vacuum trucks collect it, they have these intermediate collectors. So it's not that we've changed the incentivization, although we have really put a lot of thought into how to hold the collectors accountable and really give them accountability. And we've done everything from designing their uniforms to make sure that they're recognizable as clean team members in the community, and if they ever do anything visibly in front of the community, they can be held accountable. So we've done things like that, but really we've also just changed the model and created something where it's just as easy, if not easier, for them to dump it in the proper way than it was to dump it improperly.
So I think that actually brings up a great question that I have, which is you do a lot of design research and user experience research. And so from working at Method, the kind of user experience research you do there, to the working on this project where you're in a different culture, how different were the methods that you used and how much applicability did you see across those fields?
Yeah, it's a great question. Very different methods. At Method, we had a 3D printer in-house. We had pretty good budgets and just sort of team support for the prototyping process. We didn't do much user research. We really shot with our gut, for better or for worse, with a lot of things. I think it's really a really important thing to find that balance between listening to users and guiding them as well. And I think at Method we were doing a bit of both. We knew the desire for beautiful products. We knew the desire for a better experience and a brand with personality. In terms of the functional elements, one of their great innovations of the last year or two has been their new laundry dispenser, which is taking the big jugs and putting it into a tiny, beautiful bottle with a pump, and you just squirt 4 pumps of laundry detergent into your load, and you're ready to go. I think with a functional innovation like that, it's pretty obvious that the old solution wasn't working. If you've ever done laundry, you know that old cup method was a pretty bad experience. So it was really just a matter of working internally to figure out what we thought was the best way to do things, and working with our engineers and our chemists to figure out what was possible within our budgets and within our time frames. So I think we really did a lot of internal research and ideation, whereas with IDEO and other groups where it's more focused on cultures that are far into our own, I think it's irresponsible to shoot from the hip in those markets. So I think it becomes a lot more important to really understand the cultural legacy and history, but also what the sort of current and potential implications are with whatever you're designing. So I think it becomes a lot more important to integrate anthropology and design research and really extensive testing into those types of models.
Fantastic. So we have another question from Shraddha. She wants to know, what is your opinion on having a precedent for including sanitation habits? One of the things I thought I was having a pay toilet, a toilet that you paid for using it. As a product and service also needs behavioral change. So I guess this question is really around the idea of, if you're used to paying for something, did you see a big behavior change, and how did you sort of work that into the model?
Yeah.
I think you kind of...
Yeah, so the payment system was interesting. I think one of our early assumptions, or early hypotheses, I should say, was that one-time big payments were really difficult for people. I think we've heard a lot about this in microfinance and world, but it's really difficult for people to save money for something big. It's a lot easier for people to spend small amounts of money frequently, and this is something that we knew to be true in this community. So we really worked to design around that constraint. So yes, the product costs a lot upfront, not a lot by my standards, but a lot in these communities. It's I want to say $50 or less, but it's still a significant investment. The challenge was, how can you spread that out over time? And because we were having frequent services, we really figured it just made sense to connect those services to frequent payments. Yeah. So we started with bi-weekly payments or something like that, and tested different models. And to be honest, I'm not sure what the current model is in terms of how often they're collecting payments, but frequent small payments is the model that we went after.
And I think we've seen a lot of that throughout what's happening sort of in social innovation, which is this sort of pay-as-you-go model, or micro-lending. It's about how do you break things down into smaller equivalents. Yeah. One more question that I sort of have for you is that when we talk about what kind of teams are you working with, like who actually makes up the team? Because you talk a lot about like anthropological research, and you're talking about sort of business models and systems, and even culturally appropriate, like meeting the right people within those cultures and situations. So what did the team look like that you worked with?
That's a great question. I always get called out on panels and stuff. I always say that's a great question. But it was.
Well, I like it.
So the team structures vary from project to project, but I think as a designer working on these types of projects, I think our greatest strength is also our greatest weakness, and that is that we come into these projects not knowing anything. I knew absolutely nothing about sanitation a year and a half ago, other than that I had access to it, and that was cool. So I think it's really important to become an expert, and if you consider sort of all of the things you need to become an expert on, you need to understand the technical needs, so the engineering and biology, chemistry, and sort of environmental health needs. You need to understand the cultural needs and the anthropological and historical context. And then you also need to know, in this case, and in many cases, the I don't want to say the bureaucratic needs, but the policy and the political needs. And so I think for this project, we as IDEO worked closely with our partners at Unilever and Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor. And in particular, Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor had a strong presence in Kumasi and had access to the political figures that we needed to talk to get buy-in for us to at least be there developing this idea. And we consistently kept them in the loop and made sure that they were kept in the loop. So they were a really valuable partner in terms of providing that access. On the technology front, we worked with both of them to understand, both partners to understand the engineering and chemical needs, as well as the production and manufacturing and business needs. And then as for the anthropology, that was where we really focused. So IDEO has a great legacy of really working in that intersection of anthropology, design, and business. And we worked with a lot of different methods. And like I said, all of our deliverables are on the website, which is ghanasan.com. We outline all the methods in there, but we worked with drawings and prototypes and co-creation exercises and all sorts of different ways of trying to get at the information we needed. So that was for the early concepting, and then as we got further along, we called in mechanical engineers to help us with some of the engineering challenges, and we called up a few sanitation experts to get gut checks here and there. But generally, it was really us working as the anthropologists and sort of pulling in the experts as we needed them.
That's great. So we only have time for a couple more questions, and we have a few more that came in. So Emmerich asked, how did you evaluate the people's response of the new toilet implementation in the communities?
That's a great question. So There we go again. So, Emmerich, to answer your question, one of the great things about this model, as opposed to some traditional NGO models, and I'm not for business as a solution to everything, but I think this is one example of where having a business approach skeptical in several places to begin with, and so that we ended up offering the first month free and really doing a lot with marketing collateral and everything like that to get the word out in the community. And I think to date we've only had one person cancel their subscription or their membership. So so out of 100 homes, that's a pretty good retention rate. So I think that's on a superficial level, that is measuring just people's willingness to participate. As to how it is being received or how it's affecting the health of the home and the health of the neighborhood and everything, Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor is doing all of the diligence of tracking the impact, measuring the hygiene, making sure that the waste is disposed of properly, and making sure that all of those things that the user can't necessarily understand or doesn't need to understand, making sure that all of those things are happening in the best possible way. So for more questions on that, you're welcome to contact them or contact me, and I'm happy to put you in touch.
Great. And so, I mean, I would just say, just in closing, we have a few more questions. I'm sorry we can't get to them. You can definitely email us with any questions that you have. It's dsiinfo@sva.edu. And I just think what's really amazing about the work that you're doing is it brings in so many different aspects of design. You've talked a lot about sort of communication, about not only how you communicate with your stakeholders, but what your products communicate, and even the advertisement for method, how you communicate what the value is. And I think there's such a great role for designers to really sort of elucidate what that value is and put it out there in various parts of the system.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for your time tonight. We will have this webinar up on our website soon, and you can see any of the past webinars. And if you have any questions, please let us know, and we'd be happy to answer. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys.